Commander Alan Moore stood at the large window of Space Station Freedom, his eyes fixed on the broken ship floating in the darkness of space. The USS Trailblazer was once beautiful. It had been the pride of Earth, the first ship humans built to travel to another star. Now it looked sad and broken, its metal skin torn and twisted. Alan's reflection stared back at him from the glass. He was tall with short brown hair and tired eyes. After 20 years in the space program, he had seen both great wins and terrible losses. But nothing hurt like seeing the Trailblazer like this. Quite a mess, isn't it? Alan turned to see Admiral Judy Winters walking toward him. She was in her full uniform, her gray hair pulled back tightly. Her face showed the same pain he felt. 3 years of work, Alan said softly. Gone in 10 minutes. The Trailblazer had failed just hours into its first flight. The new engine, which was supposed to bend space to travel faster than light, had broken down. The crew barely made it back alive. The Verudians want to meet with us again, Admiral Winters said. Her voice had a hard edge to it. They're coming here in 1 hour. Alan felt his jaw tighten. The Verudians. 6 months ago, humans had no idea aliens existed. Then 3 huge ships appeared near Jupiter. The aliens called themselves Verudians, and they came with smiles and offers of friendship. They said they had been watching Earth for decades and decided humans were finally ready to join the wider universe. At first, everyone was excited. Aliens. Real aliens with amazing technology, who wanted to be friends. But soon the excitement faded. The Verudians didn't treat humans like equals. They acted more like adults watching children play. What do they want now? Alan asked. Haven't they laughed enough? The memory still burned in his mind. Ambassador Kelth, the lead Verudian, had asked to see the Trailblazer before its first flight. The alien was tall and thin with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. His face had tentacles where a human would have a mouth. He moved with grace that made humans look clumsy. Alan had proudly shown him around the ship. The Verudian had nodded and made polite sounds until they reached the engine room. There, Kelth had stared at the new space-bending engine for a long moment. Then he made a strange chirping sound. He's laughing, the translator said. Is something funny, Ambassador? Alan had asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Charming, Kelth had said. Like watching children stack blocks and call it a skyscraper. Now looking at the broken ship, Alan wondered if the alien had been right. They say they want to help us, Admiral Winters said. They've offered to show us the right way to build an interstellar ship. How generous of them, Alan said bitterly. A young officer hurried up to them and saluted. Admiral, Commander, the Verudian shuttle is approaching. They'll dock in 15 minutes. Admiral Winters nodded. We'll meet them in Conference Room A. Make sure Chief Engineer Peterson is there too. As the officer hurried away, Alan turned back to the window. We should say yes, he said quietly. To what? Winters asked. To their help. We need to learn from them. Admiral Winters looked surprised. I thought you of all people would hate that idea. Alan placed his hand against the cold glass. I do hate it, but I hate the idea of giving up even more. 30 minutes later, Alan sat at the large table in Conference Room A. Ambassador Kelth sat across from him with 2 other Verudians. Their 4-armed bodies made human chairs look strange, but they seemed comfortable enough. We were deeply saddened to hear about your ship's failure, Kelth said. His words came through the translator with perfect clarity, but Alan detected no real sadness in the alien's eyes. Thank you for your concern, Admiral Winters replied stiffly. Such accidents are common when species first attempt space travel beyond their own star systems. Another Verudian said, It took our ancestors many attempts before success. How many attempts? Chief Engineer Peterson asked. He was a short man with clever hands and a mind that never stopped working. The Verudians looked at each other. Our history records 3 major design failures, Kelth said, before we created a working fold space drive. Only 3 failures. Alan felt his stomach sink. Humans might need 30 before getting it right. We've come to offer our help, Kelth continued. We would be happy to provide guidance so you can understand where your design went wrong. Just guidance? Alan asked. Not the actual technology? Kelth's face tentacles moved in what might have been a smile. Giving advanced technology to developing species rarely ends well, but we can teach you the correct principles. Like teachers helping students, Alan said. Exactly, Kelth seemed pleased. You understand perfectly. The meeting went on for an hour. The Verudians showed holographic images of how space could be folded properly. They pointed out 27 major flaws in the Trailblazers' design. Each time, they were polite. Each time, their politeness hurt more than insults would. Avi. When the aliens finally left, the three humans sat in silence. Well, Peterson said at last, at least we know why it failed. We know we're stupid, you mean? Admiral Winters said sharply. Alan stood up and walked to the wall screen. He turned it on to show the broken Trailblazer again. We're not stupid, he said quietly. We're just young. He turned to face his colleagues. I want to rebuild her. Admiral Winters blinked in surprise. With Verudian help, you mean? No. Alan's voice grew stronger. Not their way. Our way. But better. Peterson laughed without humor. And how do we do that? You heard them. We didn't just get a few things wrong. Our whole understanding of space-time. Folding is wrong. Then we'll learn, Alan said. We'll study everything the Verudians show us, but we'll find our own path. They'll laugh at us again, Winters warned. Alan nodded. Yes, they will, until they don't. He walked closer to the screen and touched the image of the broken ship. I want to put together a team, the best minds on Earth, not just scientists and engineers, but thinkers who see things differently. The budget, Winters began, will be worth it, Alan finished for her, because this isn't just about one ship anymore. This is about showing the Verudians and ourselves what humans can really do. Admiral Winters studied him for a long moment. Then something in her face changed. She stood straighter, and for the first time that day she smiled. Make me a list of names, she said. Anyone you want. As Alan left the room, he took one last look at the Trailblazer. The Verudians had laughed at the ship. Soon they would learn that humans didn't give up easily. They would learn that sometimes, laughter was just the beginning of the story. 1 week after his meeting with the Verudians, Alan Moore stood in a large room on the ground floor of Space Command headquarters. The walls were covered with screens showing pictures of the broken Trailblazer. In the middle of the room was a big table with a glowing 3D model of the ship floating above it. Alan checked his watch. In 10 minutes, the people he had chosen for his team would arrive. Admiral Winters had approved every name on his list, though she had raised her eyebrows at some of his choices. You really think this mix of people will work together? She had asked. No, Alan had answered honestly. They'll fight, they'll argue, they'll drive each other crazy, but they'll also push each other to think in new ways. The door opened and the first member of his team walked in. Dr. Olivia Garcia was small and quick-moving, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. At 35, she had almost won the Nobel Prize 3 times for her work in quantum physics. Commander Moore, she said, shaking his hand firmly. Your message said this was important. The most important project of our lives, he replied. Thank you for coming. Before he could explain more, the door opened again. A tall man with broad shoulders and rough hands walked in. He wore jeans and a work shirt while everyone else wore suits or uniforms. Kyle Bennett, he said simply. His voice was deep and he spoke slowly, measuring each word. You asked for a mechanic who understands space engines. That's me. Kyle had never gone to college. He had learned by doing, starting in car shops in Detroit and working his way up to the space program's engine testing facility. What he lacked in formal education, he made up for with an almost magical ability to understand how machines worked. Olivia looked at Kyle with doubt in her eyes. Alan knew she was wondering why a mechanic was there with scientists. Over the next few minutes, more people arrived. Sam Richmond, tall and thin with nervous energy, had designed 3 different record-breaking aircraft. Mary Dawson, quiet and thoughtful, was the best computer programmer in the space program. Frank Ortiz, with his loud laugh and quick mind, knew more about alien cultures than anyone on Earth. Last to arrive was a woman Alan wasn't sure would come at all. Catherine Lee walked in just as he was about to start the meeting. Everyone in the room went quiet. Catherine was famous, not just for her brilliant work in engine design, but also for turning down job offers from every major space agency in the world. She preferred to work alone in her private lab. "Dr. Lee," Alan said, unable to hide his surprise. "I'm glad you could join us." Catherine nodded but said nothing. Her eyes went straight to the 3D model of the Trailblazer. Alan took a deep breath and faced the group. "Thank you all for coming. What I'm about to ask you to do is nearly impossible. The Trailblazer was supposed to be our first ship to travel to another star. Instead, it broke apart on its first flight." He touched controls on the table, and the 3D model changed to show the inside of the engine room. "This is where everything went wrong. Our space folding engine failed." "Because we didn't understand the basic science," Olivia said. "That's what the Verudians think," Alan agreed. "They've offered to teach us the right way to build a starship." Kyle crossed his arms. "And we're going to let aliens tell us how to build our ships?" "No," Alan said firmly. "We're going to learn everything we can from them. Then we're going to find our own way to make this work." He looked at each person in the room. "I chose each of you because you're the best at what you do. But more importantly, I chose you because none of you accept failure." For the next 3 hours, they talked about what had gone wrong with the Trailblazer. Olivia explained the problems with their understanding of space-time. Sam showed where the ship's structure had failed under the stress. Kyle pointed out weaknesses in the engine design that no one else had noticed. As the day went on, the mood in the room changed. At first, everyone had seemed doubtful, but slowly, as they shared ideas, hope began to grow. Near the end of the day, Catherine Lee, who had been quiet until then, stood up and walked to the 3D model. "The Verudians are right about one thing," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "Our understanding of space folding was wrong, but that doesn't mean our approach was wrong." She touched the controls and the model changed to show the engine from a new angle. "We tried to force space to bend in ways it doesn't want to bend. We need to work with space, not against it." "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, leaning forward, with interest. Catherine smiled slightly. "The Verudians use a lot of power to make a big fold in space, but what if we make many small folds instead? Less power for each fold, but the same result in the end." "Would that work?" Sam asked. "I don't know," Catherine admitted, "but it's a human solution, not a Verudian one." That became their approach. Each day the team met and worked on different parts of the ship. They studied everything the Verudians would show them, but they didn't just copy alien ideas. They found human ways to solve the same problems. It wasn't easy. They argued often. Kyle and Olivia had a shouting match about engine design that could be heard 3 floors away. Sam stopped talking to Frank for 2 days after Frank called one of Sam's ideas nice but useless. But they made progress. Week by week, the 3D model of the Trailblazer changed. It was no longer just a copy of the old ship. It was becoming something new. 4 weeks into the project, Ambassador Kelth asked to see their work. Alan didn't want to show him, but Admiral Winters insisted it was good politics. The Verudian walked slowly around the room, looking at their designs and listening to their explanations. His face showed nothing, but his 4 hands kept moving nervously. "You've made interesting changes," he said finally. "Your approach is unusual." "But will it work?" Alan asked directly. The alien was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps, in a limited way. It lacks the elegance of our solution, but it might function for short distances." After Kelth left, the team was quiet. "He still thinks we're playing with toys," Kyle said angrily. "Good," Catherine replied with a small smile. "Let him think that." That night, Alan found Olivia working alone in the lab, staring at complex equations that filled a large screen. "You should get some rest," he told her. She shook her head. I'm close to something. The Verudians use math that's centuries ahead of ours. But math is math. There have to be connections between their approach and ours. Alan looked at the glowing numbers and symbols. They meant nothing to him, but he understood the drive that kept Olivia working late into the night. It was the same drive that pushed all of them, the need to prove that humans belonged among the stars. We'll get there, he said, one step at a time. As he left the building, Alan looked up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the broken trailblazer waited, and beyond it, the stars. 3 months had passed since Alan Moore brought his team together. The work on rebuilding the trailblazer was moving forward, but not fast enough. Every time they solved one problem, 2 more appeared. The team was getting tired and frustrated. One night, Alan found Kyle Bennett alone in the workshop. The big mechanic was staring at a piece of the engine, turning it over and over in his hands. Still working? Alan asked. Kyle nodded without looking up. Something's not right with this part. I can feel it. Alan had learned to trust Kyle's feelings about machines. The man might not know all the science, but he understood how things worked in a way that went beyond books and numbers. What's wrong with it? Alan asked. Kyle frowned. It's too alien. We're trying to copy the Verudians, but we're not them. Our hands are different. Our minds work differently. He put the part down and looked at Alan. We need to make this ship fit humans, not aliens. The next day, Alan called everyone together. They met in the big room where they had first gathered. But it looked very different now. The walls were covered with drawings and notes. Models of different ship parts sat on every table. It looked messy, but Alan knew that important work was happening here. We need to talk, he said. We've been working for 3 months and we've made progress, but I think we're going in the wrong direction. What do you mean? Sam asked. The aircraft designer looked tired. He had been working on the ship's hull for weeks without a break. We're trying too hard to be like the Verudians, Alan said. We're trying to jump ahead hundreds of years in just a few months. That's the whole point, Olivia said. We need to catch up. Alan shook his head. No, we need to move forward, but in our own way. Kyle said something last night that made me think. We're not Verudians, we're humans. We should build a human ship. Catherine Lee, who rarely spoke at meetings, looked up with interest. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop trying to make a perfect copy of Verudian technology. Instead, let's take what we've learned from them and combine it with what we know works. A hybrid approach, Frank nodded. Take alien ideas but adapt them to human thinking. Mary, who had been quiet until now, smiled slightly. That's what I've been doing with the computer systems. I couldn't understand the Verudian logic, so I created a translation layer between their way of thinking and ours. For the first time in weeks, Alan saw real excitement in his team's eyes. They began to talk all at once, sharing ideas they had been afraid to mention before because they weren't advanced enough. The new approach changed everything. Instead of trying to make one big leap forward, they made many small steps. They combined Earth technology they understood well with new ideas they learned from the Verudians. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Kelth came to check on their progress. The Verudian walked slowly around the workshop, looking at their work. His face tentacles moved in what Alan had learned was confusion. You've changed direction, Kelth said. Yes, Alan agreed. We're taking a more human approach. The alien picked up one of the engine parts. It was clearly based on Verudian design but changed to work better with human controls. This is interesting, Kelth said. His translator made the word sound like he meant strange or wrong. But it won't work as efficiently as our design. Maybe not, Alan admitted. But it will work for us. After the Verudian left, the team went back to work with new energy. They were no longer trying to impress the aliens. They were building something they understood and believed in. 1 month later, they were ready to start rebuilding the real ship. The broken trailblazer was brought back to Earth and into a huge building called Hangar 12. There, the team began the hard work of turning their ideas into reality. It wasn't easy. The first test of the new engine system failed completely. The second test worked for 10 seconds, then shut down. But each time they learned something new and made the system better. It's like teaching a child to walk, Olivia told Alan after a particularly difficult day. There are a lot of falls before the first real steps. Ambassador Kelth continued to visit every week. Each time, he would watch their work, make polite comments, and leave with that same chirping laugh that the translator called amused disbelief. Your persistence is admirable, he told Alan one day. But perhaps you should accept that some species are meant to learn from others rather than create their own path to the stars. The comment made Alan angry, but he kept his voice calm. We are learning from you, Ambassador, but we're also learning about ourselves. 6 months into the project, they faced their biggest challenge yet. The space folding system, which would allow the ship to travel faster than light, kept failing during tests. No matter what they tried, they couldn't get it to work for more than a few minutes at a time. The team met in the conference room to discuss the problem. Everyone looked tired and worried. Maybe the Verudians are right, Sam said quietly. Maybe we're just not ready for this technology. No, Catherine said firmly. She stood up and walked to the screen on the wall. We're missing something basic. She touched controls and brought up pictures of Verudian ships. Look at their ships, what do you notice? The team studied the images. They're beautiful, Mary said. They're efficient, Olivia added. They're alive, Kyle said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. What do you mean? Alan asked. Kyle pointed at the ships. Look at the way they're built. They're not just machines. They respond to their environment, adjust, adapt like living things. Catherine smiled. Exactly. The Verudians don't just build ships, they grow them. Their technology is partly biological. We can't copy that, Olivia said with a frown. We don't have the knowledge. No, Catherine agreed. But we can learn from the idea. Our ship doesn't need to be alive, but it needs to be more flexible, more able to adjust to the stresses of space folding. This new insight changed their approach again. They rebuilt the control systems to be more responsive. They made the engine core more adaptable, able to adjust its output based on feedback from sensors throughout the ship. Little by little, the Trailblazer was becoming something new. Not a Verudian ship, not the original human ship, but something in between, something unique. One day, Admiral Winters came to see their progress. She walked around the half-rebuilt ship, asking questions and listening carefully to the answers. When will it be ready for a test flight? She asked Alan. He thought for a moment. 2 more months, if everything goes well. She nodded. The Verudian High Council has requested to send observers for the test. They still don't think it will work, Alan said. No, Winters agreed. They don't. Do you? Alan looked at his team working on different parts of the ship. They had come so far from where they started. They had learned, failed, tried again, and kept going. Yes, he said. It will work. Not because we've copied the Verudians, but because we've found our own way. The morning of the test flight was clear and cool. The rebuilt Trailblazer sat on the launch pad, gleaming in the early sunlight. It looked very different from the original ship. The hull was smoother, with new metal alloys that Sam had designed. The engine section was larger, with extra shielding that Kyle had insisted they needed. Alan Moore stood at the control room window, watching as the final checks were being made. In 1 hour, they would know if all their work had paid off or if the Verudians had been right all along. Nervous? Admiral Winters asked, coming to stand beside him. Terrified, Alan admitted, but also ready. The control room was crowded. Along one wall sat the Verudian delegation. Ambassador Kelth was there with 5 other aliens. They watched the humans work with what seemed like polite interest, but Alan had learned to spot the small movements of their face tentacles that showed they were actually worried. They think we're going to blow ourselves up, Alan said quietly to Admiral Winters. Are we? She asked. Alan smiled slightly. I don't think so, but we're definitely going to surprise them. The plan for today was simple, but ambitious. The Trailblazer would launch and fly to the moon. There, it would use its new space-folding engine to jump to Mars. If all went well, the trip would take minutes instead of months. "Final checks are complete," Mary's voice came through the speaker. She was in the ship handling the computer systems. "All green." "Engine room ready," Kyle reported from his station inside the ship. One by one, each team member reported in. They had all insisted on being on board for the test flight. If something went wrong, they wanted to be there to fix it. "The ship is ready," Alan told Admiral Winters. "I should get on board." She put a hand on his arm. "Be careful out there, all of you." Alan nodded and headed for the door. As he passed the Verudian delegation, Ambassador Kelth stood up. "Commander Moore," the alien said. "A moment, please." Alan stopped. "Yes, Ambassador." The alien's four hands moved in a pattern that Alan had come to recognize as nervousness. "Your ship remains fundamentally unsafe by our standards," he said. "The way you've adapted our concepts shows promise, but you've rushed the development." For once, there was no condescension in the alien's voice, just genuine concern. "Thank you for your concern," Alan said sincerely. "But this is something we need to do ourselves." 20 minutes later, Alan sat in the captain's chair on the bridge of the Trailblazer. Around him, his team worked at their stations. Olivia monitored the space-folding systems. Sam watched the ship's structure. Catherine focused on the engine core. Kyle stood ready in the engine room 2 decks below. "All systems go," Mary reported from the computer station. "Launch sequence starting." Alan took a deep breath. "Let's make history." The launch was smooth. The Trailblazer rose from Earth on powerful chemical rockets, old technology that humans understood perfectly. As they cleared the atmosphere, the regular engines kicked in, pushing them toward lunar orbit. "Ship is performing perfectly," Sam reported, unable to hide the pride in his voice. "We're approaching lunar orbit," Olivia said. "Space folding systems, ready for activation." This was the moment of truth. The original Trailblazer had failed during this exact part of its mission. The new space-folding engine was their own design, based on what they had learned from the Verudians, but built for human use. "All crew, secure for spacefold," Alan ordered. "Activating in 10 or 9, 8. As Alan counted down, he could feel the tension on the bridge. Everyone knew what was at stake. 3, 2, 1, activate. Catherine pressed the controls. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the ship began to vibrate. The view screen showed the stars smearing across space as reality seemed to bend around them. Suddenly, alarms began to blare. The ship shuddered violently. "Power fluctuations. In the main core," Catherine called out, her fingers flying over her controls. "The hull is holding," Sam reported, "but stress levels are rising fast." "Computer systems going offline," Mary shouted over the noise of the alarms. Alan gripped his chair as the ship bucked like a wild animal. "Olivia, status of the space fold. It's D. Unstable," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The fold is forming, but we can't control it properly." Alan hit the comm button. "Kyle, we need more stability in the engine room." "Working on it." Kyle's voice came back, nearly drowned out by the sound of machinery. "The power distribution is all wrong. I'm adjusting manually." For 30 terrible seconds, the Trailblazer shook and alarms screamed. Then slowly the vibrations began to lessen. The alarms quieted one by one. "Kyle did it," Catherine said with surprise in her voice. "He's balancing the power flow by hand." "The spacefold is stabilizing," Olivia reported. "We're moving it. This can't be right." She checked her readings again. "We're moving at 1/10 the speed of light." A cheer went up on the bridge. 1/10 light speed was far slower than Verudian ships could travel, but it was faster than any human ship in history. "How long to Mars?" Alan asked, trying to keep his voice professional despite the excitement he felt. "At this speed, about 20 minutes, Olivia answered. "We're actually going to do it." The rest of the journey was smoother. Kyle had to make constant adjustments to keep the engine stable, but the ship held together. The spacefold worked exactly as they had hoped. When they reached Mars orbit, Alan gave the order to shut down the space-folding engine. The stars stopped smearing across the screens and returned to their normal pinpoints of light. Mars hung below them, red and beautiful. "Did it?" Sam said, his voice filled with wonder. "We actually did it. Not bad for children stacking blocks," Catherine said with a small smile. The return journey was even easier. They had learned from the first spacefold and made small adjustments. When the Trailblazer finally docked back at the space station, the entire crew was smiling like children on Christmas morning. As they stepped off the ship, they were met by Admiral Winters and the Verudian delegation. Ambassador Kelth's face tentacles were moving rapidly in what Alan now recognized as extreme surprise. "You succeeded," the alien said. His translator made the words sound flat, but Alan could hear the disbelief behind them. "We did," Alan agreed. "Your methods were unorthodox," another Verudian said. "The manual adjustments to the power flow, the simplified fold mathematics, the biological feedback systems. Human solutions," Alan explained. Admiral Winters stepped forward. "I think this calls for a celebration. Ambassador, would you and your delegation care to join us?" The Verudians looked at each other. Then, to Alan's surprise, Kelth made a gesture he had never seen before. The alien placed his upper right hand over the center of his chest and bowed, slightly. "We would be honored," he said. And this time, there was no condescension in his voice at all. As they walked away from the ship, Kyle moved up beside Alan. "They're not laughing anymore," the big mechanic said quietly. Alan smiled. "No, they're not. But this is just the beginning. We've proven we can make the jump to Mars. Next we go for the stars." 6 months after the successful test flight to Mars, the Trailblazer was ready for its original mission. A journey to Proxima Centauri, the closest star to our sun. The ship had been improved again, using lessons learned from the Mars flight. Alan Moore stood in the large meeting room at Space Command looking at his team. They had changed over the past year. They looked more confident now, more sure of themselves and what they could do. "Tomorrow we make history," Alan said. "The first human ship to travel to another star." "The first human Verudian hybrid ship," a voice corrected from the doorway. Alan turned to see a Verudian standing there, but it wasn't Ambassador Kelth. This was Science Envoy Mira, who had replaced Kelth 2 months ago. "Envoy Mira," Alan greeted her with a small bow. "Thank you for coming." The Verudian walked into the room, her movements more relaxed than Kelth's had ever been. "I've been studying your ship's design," she said. "It's quite remarkable. We learned a lot from your people," Alan admitted. "And we have learned from yours," Mira said, surprising everyone in the room. "Your power distribution system, the one Kyle designed to be adjusted by hand. We've begun using a version of it in our newer ships." "Really?" Kyle asked, his eyes wide with surprise. "Yes. Our engineers found it 28% more efficient in changing conditions than our old model." She made a gesture with her 4 hands that Alan had learned meant respect. "We laughed at your ship, because we forgot that new ideas don't come from doing things perfectly. They come from trying new ways when the old ways don't work." The next morning, a crowd gathered to watch the Trailblazer launch. Human and Verudian observers stood side by side. What had started as a moment of shame for humans had become a point of pride. Admiral Winters addressed the crew before they boarded. "The Trailblazer isn't just carrying you to another star," she said. "It's carrying a message about who we are as humans. We don't need to be the most advanced beings in the galaxy. We just need to keep moving forward, learning, and growing." Alan was about to board the ship. He was surprised to see Ambassador Kelth walking toward him. The former ambassador had returned for the launch. "Commander Moore," Kelth said, "I wish to give you something." He held out a small device. "Emergency communications," he explained. "Just in case, though I doubt you will need it." Alan took the device with a nod of thanks. "No hard feelings about the laughing?" For the first time, Kelth made a sound that the translator called gentle amusement, rather than mocking laughter. "The joke, I think, was on us in the end." "The journey to Proxima Centauri would take just over 4 years instead of the decades originally planned. As Earth grew smaller behind them and the crew settled in for the long voyage, Alan thought about how far they had come. The ship around them wasn't perfect. It wasn't as advanced as Verudian vessels, but it was theirs, built with human hands and human minds. In the engine room, Kyle worked with his team making small adjustments that kept the space folding drive running smoothly. On the bridge, Olivia monitored the fold mathematics while Sam watched the ship's structure. In the computer center, Mary made sure all systems worked together properly. And in his captain's quarters, Alan looked at a small model of the original Trailblazer that sat on his desk. The broken ship that aliens had laughed at had become the vessel that would carry humans to the stars. He remembered what Admiral Winters had told him after the successful Mars flight. The greatest human quality isn't our intelligence or our technology. It's our stubborn refusal to give up. The Trailblazer sped toward Proxima Centauri, carrying with it the unbreakable human spirit that had always reached for the stars, no matter how impossible the journey seemed or who might be watching, and no one was laughing anymore.